Here's your money briefing for Friday, March 17th. I'm J.R. Whalen for the Wall Street Journal. There are some unexpected ways you can reduce your tax bill. A few have to do with medical expenses. WSJ tax reporter Laura Saunders went through the list of expenses that qualify, and she joins me now. Hey, Laura, thanks a lot for being here.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, Laura, for a lot of people, medical expenses are covered by insurance. So how can these expenses make their way onto someone's tax return?
I would say that not all medical expenses are covered by insurance. And if they're not covered by insurance, if they're unreimbursed, they might be able to be deductible as medical expenses on your tax return on Schedule A as an itemized deduction.
I guess we're talking about more than just the cost of a doctor's visit.
Yes, we are. It could be all kinds of things that relate to health and expenses for health or for illness. And for instance, we point out that the cost of a home elevator, if someone is disabled, could be deductible. Now, that's not a small cost. Also, tuition, maybe $50,000 of tuition a year to a special needs school, fees for assisted living and nursing homes and things like that, and also even a swimming pool.
Well, hold on. A swimming pool? You put a pool in the backyard and it's deductible?
I've heard of more than one that was deductible. It may not be fully deductible, but in the case that I'm thinking of, the CPA had a client who was building a house and putting in a pool recommended by a doctor for a family member's chronic illness. Now, that's not great to have a chronic illness, but it is nice to have a swimming pool. And so the cost of that was deductible.
Okay, so these are things that are serving a medical need. So you can't just put a pool in, you have to have some sort of a doctor's note?
Yes, you do. And you also have to have an appraisal of the home's value before and after you make the improvement, like the elevator or the swimming pool. And if it increases the value of your home, you have to subtract that from the deduction.
All right, so what else qualifies for the deduction?
Oh, just so many things, large and small, including, for instance, bandages, breast pumps, guide dogs, contact lenses and contact lens solution, dentures, stop smoking programs, obesity treatment, all kinds of things like that.
Bandages. So if I buy bandages, can I just turn around and deduct those?
Well, I don't think you can deduct Band-Aids, but let's say you had surgery and you needed special bandages and maybe even you needed a lot of them. That could be part of your medical expenses that are deductible.
All right, so I would imagine a lot of people aren't familiar with this legal deduction to put on their tax return.
Yes, that's right. They aren't. Only about 4 million tax filers out of maybe 160 million took it in 2020. That's the most recent data we have. But it's interesting that the average deduction was $22,000.
Wow.
Yeah, so when it rains, maybe it pours. I mean, nobody's happy about having medical expenses, but it can be pretty good to get a deduction when you have them.
So what's the math here? Can you deduct the entire cost of, say, a guide dog or a pool?
Well, how it works is that there are two limits that trip up a lot of people. One is that you must itemize your deductions on Schedule A. You can't just take the standard deduction. Of course, 90% of Americans now take the standard deduction. But the other thing is that you can only deduct expenses that are greater than 7.5% of your adjusted gross income. Now, adjusted gross income includes your wages and investment income and things like that. It does not include your deductions and your standard deduction. So if a couple had $200,000 of income, then they couldn't deduct the first $15,000 of eligible expenses.
So this has to be a robust number to really be able to show up as a deduction.
In many cases, it does, unless maybe you don't have a lot of income for the year, you see.
All right, but what if someone's medical expenses aren't high enough to qualify for this particular deduction? What else should they be aware of?
Well, I think it's important to be aware of the breadth of this deduction because the same list that applies for medical deductions also applies for FSAs, that's flexible spending accounts, and HSAs. And so it's kind of one list. And so there's a lot to know here. Maybe you have extra FSA money, go read the list and see if there's anything on that that applies to you. The other thing is that if someone does get over that hurdle, the 7.5% hurdle, then all kinds of things that wouldn't be deductible all of a sudden are deductible. So maybe you're putting in the elevator, but you have a lot of contact lens solution. So that's why I think it's good for people to know about this because I don't think they generally do.
So what sorts of medical expenses aren't allowed to be deducted?
Well, there's a list of those, too. And in both cases, this is just an idea. The IRS might attack something. We can talk about that in a minute. But you can't deduct cosmetic surgery to improve your appearance, although I think you could deduct plastic surgery, say, after an accident or something.
So it's just some sort of elective surgery for
tummy tuck or something like that,
okay.
yeah. And you can't deduct hair transplants, health club dues, or weight loss programs that are to improve your general health. And you can't deduct funeral expenses, I guess.
Well, once you're gone, you're gone.
Yeah.
You can't take the money with you.
Yeah.
How do dependents fit into this equation?
Well, you can deduct your dependents' expenses too, particularly if you have a sick child. But there's something quite interesting. If you support someone and you meet all the tests of a dependent, it would typically be a relative or a friend who lives in your house, an elder person. And they meet all the qualifications of being a dependent, except they may have more than $4,000 of income a year. In this case, if you pay their medical expenses, you can deduct them on your own tax return.
Oh, so that gets swept up into this eligibility.
Yes, and people don't know that. It's called a medical dependent, and it's a very good thing to know about.
So let's go back to the list of things that are deductible for a moment. Is it a finite list, or is it the sort of thing where sort of see what looks like it qualifies and what doesn't could make the list, might not?
Well, I think that's a really important question to ask because the IRS's list, even though it's 10 pages long, is only just a sample. They're examples. The law is very clear, and there may be things that are not on the list that are allowed. And we came across a tax court case where a woman took $30,000 deduction for so-called energy healing for severe spinal problems. And she'd been told that surgery could hurt her. And the IRS rejected it, and she went to tax court, and she won her $30,000 deduction. So there's leeway here in the law, and the judges can apply it.
So that was something not on the list that was determined could or should be on the list.
Yes.
All right, that's Wall Street Journal tax reporter Laura Saunders. Laura, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for Your Money Briefing this week. Your Money Briefing's producer is Mohsen Ali. Our supervising producer is Melanie Roy, and our executive producer is Chris Zinsley. I'm your host, J.R. Whalen. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.